Genius, get onto my show. Yeah, no, we're recording now. But your voice sounds fine. It's just kind of sounds like this a little bit, but you know,
So a little Michael Jackson filter happening.
exactly. Yeah, just like your normal
Uh-huh,
voice.
uh-huh. Oh my God.
So how are you?
Hmm. I'm okay. I just, getting myself together this morning. Woke up at 6 a.m., not of my own volition.
Yeah, what's
Brain
that
just
about?
woke up. I just lately with all the stuff going on with life and work, my brain has decided to turn me into an old man and just wake me up at ungodly hours of the morning.
It's happening to me too. I yesterday, let's see, the 2 nights ago, I woke up at I don't know, like 2 in the morning or something, and I was up till 5, and I just couldn't
Hmm.
sleep. And then I've been watching this show about it's this English guy who kind of follows people's um refurbishment of their houses. Like they buy interesting properties and they make them into these. I don't know. I forget what it's called. Anyway, it's a perfect thing to watch between 2 and 5 a.m. if you ever need to.
I love home renovation shows. There's a few that we watch. I love and hate them at the same time. I love them because it shows like the possibilities to renovate something old that's historic or interesting that maybe just didn't get the love and attention it needed, and then they update it, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah,
Here's what I hate. I live in Los Angeles County, where I can't buy a fixer upper or a home state or a love it or list it. I can't buy one of these damn houses for $48,000 or $150,000 and then renovate it, for another $100,000. So the all-in cost is $250,000. Now here in LA, you buy the fixer upper for $800,000, and then you put another,
half a million. Yeah,
$200,000 or half a million for that matter, and then you get a little shack somewhere with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths that's livable.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. There's a show. There's one of those shows. I think it takes place in Mississippi or something, and it's like that. They buy houses for
Yep.
$45,000 or something, and
Laurel, Mississippi. It's
yeah,
Laurel,
yeah.
Mississippi. That's
Really
where we
nice
are. Yep.
couple, and
Hmm.
it's this couple
Nice
that's
couple.
at least partly responsible for rehabbing the whole town. Like they've made a point
Right.
of, yeah. It's a lovely story actually, but I guess it's about location. Now, I say that because when I was in my 20s, LA was the most magical place in the world. Like there was nothing like Los Angeles. But now that I'm in my 50s, I think Laurel looks pretty nice.
Yeah. Well, there's a sense of like, especially if you live near walking distance to the town, and even if you don't, there's a sense of town, of community, of an identity to the space and people around you with which you can kind of live and grow with, and relationships. In LA, I noticed that is something where it's possible, but very difficult to have the sense of relationship and community within your small neighborhood. You have to drive everywhere. You have the freeways that divide us. I mean, all of this, nonprofits do studies all the time on the divides, the 405 divide, the 110 divide. And our concert goer is willing to go back and forth or over that divide to go see a concert. And so that's indicative of our city in so many ways, like how separate we are and how hard it is to kind of just come together. But yeah, Laurel, Mississippi, man, it looks like a dream.
Yeah, I don't know anybody in my neighborhood. I know our neighbors. I know them, like the people across the street. We exchange gifts every Christmas. They're really sweet. They've got a key to our house if we
Mm,
need anything when we're out of town or whatever. My backyard neighbor I know, but all of my friends are in music, and my neighborhood really doesn't have
mm,
a lot of musicians that I know. No, nobody that I know
right.
around here, and it's LA is such a big, huge, sprawling city. And then when you talk about meeting people and finding some kind of fraternity with new friends in the city, it's really hard. And that kind of brings me to our relationship, which is really interesting
Mm,
because you're somebody who I met just 3 years ago or so,
Hmm.
um, and then we started Orchestra Los Angeles, and I feel like I made this new friend, and it is difficult to do. And then I wanted to ask you too about all the silly rehab stuff. Have you ever done any of that kind of rehabbing? When I was a little kid, I did it with my grandfather. So like for
Okay.
instance, I sent you a picture. I'm looking at it right now. I sent you a picture of the
Hmm.
stove vent that what do you call it? A range hood
Oh
that I
yeah,
installed.
the hood,
Yeah, so I do that.
the
I do
oven
that kind of
hood, or
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, do you do
yeah.
that? Is that
Um,
in your
Gosh,
wheelhouse?
yes, I can. That sort of idea, I've always been sort of really interested in, even from a kid. I would get a toy. I was the type of kid who would get a toy and take it apart and put it back together. So
Yeah,
I
me too.
remember specifically like a radio controlled, it was like a red sports car or something. And I was just like, how does this work? And you get the screwdriver out and you're just like, pull it apart and like, oh, okay, I see, like circuit board and motors and stuff like that. Didn't quite understand it, but then I would put it back together and it would still work. So I had this sort of sense of like how things fit together. How do they work? And so throughout my whole life, I've not been afraid to like get in there and like fix stuff. I've got on my tools and power tools and that sort of thing. In 2009, though, bought a condo in Culver City that the market was friendly. I guess it's a positive way to put that if you were trying to buy, anyways. And bought a condo that, gosh, it had been owned by a little old lady. God bless her, for I think 20 plus years. So the thing was like it had not gotten a renovation at all, or any more than a coat of paint inside. And so we bought the house. Me and my ex wife Jennifer, we bought the place. We had even wrote a letter. Hey, we're first time parents. We're first time home buyers. Give us a chance. We had our documents all in order. We were pre approved, and like it was so hard to buy the cheap houses or the cheap condos because all of these developers were swooping in and grabbing full cash offer. So it was just an achievement just for someone just to say, you know what, we want to give this house to you. And warts and all, everything needed to be replaced, painted, updated. And we closed on the house. I still remember this, on December 1st, and we were slated to move in January 4th. So we had 1 month, and I painted the whole place with some help from family. I bought a spray painter and like put on the whole bodysuit, sprayed down the whole thing, closets, everything. Um, I learned electrical for the house. I just got one of these sunset books, from like Home Depot. It's like,
Right, right. Yeah.
let me learn electrical engineering in an afternoon. And I, I just learned how to replace lights, the fixtures, plugs. Um, I refinished all of the cabinets. I took them all out. I backed out all the hardware, took them to a warehouse that my sister was living in at the time in East LA, and I was able to put all of the doors for all the cabinets out and like sand them down. And every couple of days, I come back and put another coat of paint on them so they'd be like nice and smooth. So I just got really crafty and just did it. I did have help doing the flooring. Like I'd never done carpet that much, or tiling, and so I hired a friend of a friend to come in and do all that for me. But yeah, it was a trip, but it was fun. I don't know. There's something like satisfying about like you did it. I did all this stuff. It may not be perfect, but I did it, and that's kind of my philosophy of life. The one thing I would always ask myself if it was a question of safety, I would say, well, what's the worst that could happen? And if the answer was death, dismemberment, or disaster, then I'd get somebody else to do that.
Right. I feel the same way. I feel like if I really mess it up, how hard would it be to fix versus just calling somebody to do
Mm-hmm.
it straight away? I always like to give it a try first. And about half the time
Yeah.
I do make it worse. I'll admit. But I feel like that's the only way to learn how to do things. And well, before I start talking about myself here, I wanted to go back and say that there are a few things that I know about you, and you've just illustrated them. One is your meticulous nature, and two is your work ethic. And I'm wondering, is that something? What is it that propels you to do to work really hard and to get it right? And how does it
Mm.
feel when, I mean, I'm getting towards perfectionism, really. I have a perfectionist streak,
I, yeah,
and it
yeah,
it can be really destructive
um,
also. So where does that come from, and how do you
yeah.
deal with failure when it doesn't work out?
Gosh, that's like the question of my life. I can say even like for better or worse, like my some of my family members, even like when I was young and into teenagehood, would say like Mike's such a perfectionist, like it was just sort of pejorative in a way, because there's something about even when I was 5, 6, 7 years old at that time, my favorite toy was space Legos. Let's just go back that far, and get the box, and you see, this is the one that was like the little tow truck towing the missile. It had this little kind of missile thing, and I put that together, and it's a little spaceman who drives the truck and I put that together, and I started collecting different ones. Something in my brain said, this is just the way it goes. There is no other way. I'm not going to disassemble it and put it back together. That's a different set of Legos. That's the set of Legos that's just the box of Legos, and you can kind of be creative and put it together in that way. But my mind is always divided, having a process and something that's just, this is the way it needs to be, versus like, okay, that's a creative thing that I can put that part of my brain into, where it can just be what it needs to be, and it can be flexible and imaginative and dynamic. It started back then. And then
Well,
how that translated and kind of grabbed into my brain in a really positive way was when I was introduced to music.
right.
And I didn't come from a musical family. I didn't have lessons. I didn't get piano lessons like other kids. That my story is such that, I came out of a situation where, when I was very young, my father was incarcerated for armed robbery and drugs, etc. And he wasn't really a part of my life. And then it left my mom with me and two sisters to try to raise. And she moved us from Los Angeles up to Northern California to be with friends and to try to establish a new environment and sort of get out of the situation of her life where, you know, maybe her kids were not in the best environment. And so that kind of pulled us up out. And so getting back to music, like, a lot of people maybe take a look at me or my career or what I've accomplished and say, well, that guy, he went to private schools. He had a full scholarship to study French horn. He went to USC.
He had
He
it
taught
all.
at
Yeah. Hmm.
USC. He's done all these things. Look at that guy. That's the privileged dude. And really, the real story in a nutshell is that I had to bite and scratch for every inch of that. And so when I was in ninth grade, I'd been exposed to music a little bit through the school program in junior high. And I'd started, but I actually ended up stopping and quitting because I was trying to work and I was doing a paper route before school in seventh grade, getting up at 4:30 a.m., rolling newspapers, putting them into bags on my bike, and going out by 6 a.m., throwing newspapers around my neighborhood, going around collecting every single day, every once a month to get people to pay. There was no PayPal back then. There was no subscriptions. We literally had to go knocking on doors and say, can you give me the $10 for the month? And if they didn't pay, I was out the money.
Right.
Um, so I got back into music in ninth grade. My best friend Jason kind of pressured me. He let the music teacher know, Steve Connolly, that I had started music by then I'd forgotten everything. And he got me back into music in ninth grade on the French horn. That was my first instrument. And it was really his viewpoint on life and music, on perseverance, on structure, on discipline, that kind of took that part of me that was like, this is the way it must be. And this is how things have to progress in order to get to a high level, sort of like locked in with me. And within a year, from my freshman year to my sophomore year, I progressed to the point where I decided I was going to get into the Northern California Honor Band. I just decided in 1 year, because I saw other people's like, I could do that. I could do that. I made the tape with the help of a teacher. We used cassettes back then, sent it in with my application, and lo and behold, I got in. I mean, that's like, yada, 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 I got in. um, and that was like the first success in my life that I could say, that's mine. That belongs to me and my effort and my search for like doing things this way. And that grabbed into me in a very positive way. It gave me direction. It put into me, my smart. I was always kind of naturally smart. I liked school. I liked studying. But it was this sort of voice that I had never experienced with anything else. I wasn't being encouraged to go to college. I wasn't really told or encouraged to pursue music at all. And so it was my thing. And it kind of saved my life in high school because it got me through some pretty dark times, through depression, got me through the feeling of loneliness, of being kind of a little bit isolated during that time, both from family and friendships. That's a whole nother story. But gosh, perfectionism now comes through to me and has both positive and negative things. Positive in that, gosh, I really want something to go well. And there's ways to do that can make something professional and beautiful. And as a conductor, you're striving for this sort of sense of perfection. And like every detail has a place and a meaning. Where that's a negative, though, and for a lot of artists, I believe, and I know this is true for you and others that I know, it can stymie you because good enough doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah, the
It doesn't
stakes
feel
become
good.
too high. They become unrealistically high. Yeah.
And that's held me back in many ways, in different projects and different things, from just like, I'm going to iterate again and again and again and not be afraid to push out and jump off that cliff or make that leap, because I might fail and it might not be good enough. And so it really has been the last, I would say, 5 years of my life to come to a point where I'm like, if I don't start taking some leaps, if I don't start taking some real push towards the life I imagine in art, then it's not going to mean much to me later on.
So one thing grabbed me, something that you said was that music was something that could be mine. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that comes from a lack of control as a child. And I know that it was for me. You and I have very, very
Mm.
similar, I mean, almost parallel upbringings. I mean,
Yeah.
my birth, my paternal, what do you call it? Paternal, my father, the person who made my mom
Mm.
pregnant, um, never went to jail, although he did hide out from the police. But
Mm.
he kind of kicked us out of the house when I was around 4. We were living in
Yeah.
Ensenada at the time, and I remember his workers. My family owned factories in Mexico, and we lived across from an aluminum factory that was for Porsche, that they made wheels and stuff. And I remember his workers like coming over and just throwing empty boxes, into the front yard over the
Mm.
chain link fence, and we like packed up
And
and left.
yeah. Oh.
My mom's second husband did end up going to prison. So we have some very similar things, and music uh, attracted me in the same way. I think I don't want to make
Mm.
any assumptions,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it was something that was mine. That nobody in my family
Yeah.
was a musician. Nobody could judge
Yeah.
me against or against somebody else in the family. Nobody else in the family was expert in music. I became the music
Yeah.
expert, um, and it
Yeah.
gave me something to control. when we're kids,
Yeah.
we don't get to choose where we live,
Yeah.
what happens to us, what if, I had feelings of abandonment, I had feelings of anxiety, and what that really comes down to is a lack of control. And I think music gave me something. I've said this before many times on my podcast and to friends that I was really good at music right away, and I didn't know that I had it until I was in my 20s. But suddenly I had this thing where I was sitting on the golden ticket. And I'm wondering if the sense of perfectionism, the sense of your meticulous nature, all of these things, are they propelled by some feeling of needing to prove yourself to somebody in your family, to prove yourself to the world or to yourself? Or where does, I mean, how old were you when everything went down with your father going to prison? Were you a little boy?
Yeah, that was, to the best of my recollection, 6 years old. And
Uh-huh.
even before that, it was very absent from my life. That he wasn't this father. It was like take me to the park and throw the ball around.
Same
We
here.
didn't go
Yeah.
on fishing trips or camping trips. It was just a sense like he was a dude that just goes floating through life, and he was a bit philosophical, a little bit religious, a little bit hippie, a little bit druggy, and he was a smart kid. My family always tried to tell me the positive things about him. Oh, my father's name was Michael as well, but they called him Mike, and I said, "Oh, Mike was so smart. He's the smartest one of all of us." That kid was, when he was in junior high and early in high school, they tested him as a genius in math and science. The kid was smart, and somehow I never got the full picture, and no one was really courageous enough to say, I'm going to sit down and tell you about your dad. I'm going to sit down and tell you what I know about him that you might be able to just understand better about him. The good and the bad, the good, bad, and the ugly, if we might, kind of go back to a great Clint Eastwood film. In fact, it's one of my favorites because in some ways, the hero or even the anti hero is something that I feel like is a part of my life or even identity. I feel in some way, like you said, like in some ways, I feel like both a hero and an anti hero in my family. Catherine, my wife, has noticed this that there's a certain kind of contempt for me in my larger family for what I do and what I represent. Not because I'm a bad guy, but it's like, be like, an aunt of mine I would go to a family picnic, and the first thing she'll say to me would be like, "Hey, stick waver," or another uncle would say, who's playing music, strumming the guitar at the picnic, and he'll say, "Hey, you still teaching at USC?" I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. That's it. That was the whole extent of their curiosity or pride in like, hey, here's one of our family members who took something that he had and and went for it and took himself out of a situation that by all rights he should have failed. I didn't have all those privileges or paths or people pushing me, helping me. There's no money for school, nothing. And so it's always been a bit of, for me, like I can feel myself sometimes going like, well, hey, F you, I'm going to do this thing. This is mine. You can't tell me that I can't do this because it's mine. I mean, can I use expletives on this?
You certainly can.
I don't know.
Yes.
It's mine, motherfucker. It's mine. But I don't say that out loud. I do it with my actions. It's like every time somebody, a mentor or a conductor would say, I could tell you this, I had my dream of like going to a great school for conducting, and I was working at the Manhattan School of Music, and I was, studying conducting. I was working as orchestral librarian. I was actually conducting. I was getting gigs as a conductor before I had my degree or anything. It was such a magical time. I was living in New York City right after I graduated college, undergraduate, and it just was like this time of like, hey, this is the time of my life that I'm going to really learn what it is to be a musician. Going to the Metropolitan Opera and watching the Ring Cycle with James Levine conducting, going to see Traviata or any of these great operas on that stage, going to watch the New York Philharmonic at that time, Kurt Masur, and meeting him and talking in conductor circles with other young conductors. It was so magical, this trajectory. I was like imagining my story and seeing it move forward. And I am part of this circle of people pushing out, and I am going to become a conductor. That is in my future. So I get to the point in Manhattan School of Music where I'm working there, and I make kind of colleagues or a mentor with one of the conducting teachers. He's a well-known Czech conductor, and he's was conductor of the New Jersey Symphony at the time. His name was Zdeněk Makal, and he's one of the foremost interpreters of Eastern European music, but also just European music in general. Well-respected conductor, and really a master teacher as well. Some ways couldn't articulate things in English very well, but the way he could just demonstrate something. He'd get a student conductor on the podium in some of these workshops, and he invited me to be in one of his workshops as a young conductor. After watching me a video of me conducting Dvorak string serenade, he says, "Yeah, there's something here. I want to invite you to my workshop." And I'd see some conductor get up there, conduct some piece. Moldau was one of them, Smetana. And it's in 6/8, and it starts with this just lovely little feeling. It's about this river, the Moldau, and the whole tone poem.
Is that the da 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 da?
Yes, bravo.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, and you're singing the minor mode one, but later it transforms into major mode. So it's this whole story about the river and the experience of moving down and through and different episodes and scenes. And there's a little marriage scene, there's the rapids, etc. But at first it just starts like a little bubbling stream, it's just trickling along. And you get a conductor up there, and they're just like dot 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 dot. They're just doing their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, and it's falling apart. And no one can figure out what the conductor is really trying to do. He can't give a good upbeat. And McCall would come up like a hawking eagle. He always scrunched over, and he would just be. and it was perfect. The same orchestra, 1 minute before, a student orchestra, struggling to be together, struggling to line up and make music. And he would simply breathe and lift a hand, and it was perfect. The same people on that stage. And I see that happen. I'm like, fuck, that's a conductor. That he is the music. And those were the moments that caught me and just said, that thing is my future. So I applied for his program. They got him to be the conductor of the master's program at Manhattan School of Music. And I was like, I have to study with this master. I need a master teacher to guide me. I've never had that in my life. My upbringing was I went to a high school of 350 people with transformative individuals. Steve Connolly, my band director, God rest his soul, transformative in my life. He was a great teacher, maybe even a master teacher, but not at the level of a Zdeněk Makal, of course, but still great. And then I go to University Pacific, great teachers, the right environment for me, a small conservatory. I was kind of a big fish in a small pond. And then I go to New York City where I'm nothing. And I want to study with this guy. So I apply for the program 1 year, and I'm conducting. It was Mozart. I still remember that. And I'm conducting along, and I have my baton, and I do a motion where I hit the stand, and my baton flies out into the second violins and just drops there. And I'm mortified, and I keep conducting, and my musicality, everything goes out the window because I'm just like, oh. And the second violins are handing me back my baton. They're like, "Here you go, maestro." And I'm like, "Ah!" I said, "That's it. I'm done. This is not going to, I'm not in the program. Everything's ruined." And indeed, that's what happened. Undaunted, fast forward, I apply the next year. And I study and I study. I do ear training. I'm doing score reading at the piano. I was not a pianist and I was not a score reader, but I'm going to try my best to do everything I can to get into this program. I'm going to, train my ear better. I just got to be better, better, better. That's the perfectionist thing. And I get to that audition and I'm conducting and I'm like, I'm feeling the music. I'm there. Yes. Conduct, get through the audition, orchestra applause, applauso, applauso, they felt it. We were there. Yes, yes, yes. The other candidates go, everyone goes. There's like they invite like 5 candidates only to this round out of all the applicants. It's over. And McCall is wondering who he needs to choose, who gets to study with me. And he's unsure. He's going to take 2 students out of the 5. And in his mind, one of them is certain. And 2 of them I'm unsure of. And one of those 2 is me. So this is what I hear from the musicians that happen next. He goes in front of the orchestra and says, "Thank you, orchestra, bravo. I wonder, I'm trying to decide between Michael and George."
Wait, hold on. Was everybody in the room? Were you in the room when this was happening?
No. Candidates had to stay outside. The whole orchestra's there, and any administrators and McCall, front of the orchestra. And he's like, "I wonder who should be in this program." Orchestra, I want to ask you, I want to get your feedback on this. Please raise your hands and vote for the candidate that you would like to see come into the program. And say, hands up for George. A few hands go up. Okay, Michael is the other candidate I'm considering. Hands up for Michael. Not just the majority, but I hear that it was almost a unanimous, like, Michael. It's not the end of the story. He's still contemplating, and he asked me to come back to the green room backstage in the Manhattan School of Music. I still remember this very clearly. Brings me back and sits me down and says, "Michael, you did a good job today. I must say, though, that I've made a decision about you." And says, I asked the orchestra, they really like you. A lot of your friends are there. They really like you. They voted for you. The test, you did well in the test, but it's just, you probably memorized a lot of the facts on that, and but I must say, you should stay a librarian or play French horn. I'm just not going to take you into my program. I said, "Maestro, I'm really confused. I feel like I really earned my way here. I showed myself, I proved myself to you, to the orchestra." And I said, "Maestro, I want to tell you that I intend to become a conductor. I will become a conductor. And in fact, I would like to shake on that." I said, I want to tell you that I am going to become a conductor, and I will come back and tell you this later, or somehow we'll meet up and I'll show you that I have done that." And he says, "Well," shakes my hand, and I'm devastated. I go out and I'm devastated, truly devastated. I went through a depressive period, crying, upset, talked to the administration. They're like, "Well, we can't control who he takes. It is his decision." And I was just, it really set me back because, if I could point and look at the students who did get into that program, many of those, and the program was only open for like 3 years too, and then he left. The Out of the, I think it was four candidates that he ended up taking during that time, three still have very high level conducting careers, including, well, I don't want to name them all because you could probably deduce that I don't want to, go into that story, but that is a linchpin in music, especially who recommends you, who puts you forward as a candidate into the ears and eyes of arts administrators. Does matter who you study with to a degree, but that set me back. And then, and in that same year, I had applied to USC, and I got an audition, and somehow, again, that's a different story, but I auditioned, and they immediately were like, "We want you, come stay here." And it just felt like, okay, let's go home. Let's go back to California. This is what the universe is telling me to do. Go back to California, be close to family and friends. Um, my father had just died. And then I also learned that my uncle, soon after I kind of moved, was diagnosed with cancer. My father had died from cancer. My grandmother had died from cancer when I was in high school as well. And now I learned that my uncle, my dear uncle, all on my father's side, is diagnosed with skin cancer. And it just feels like, I need to be close to family. I need to heal, lick my wounds, and go study. I was excited to go to USC too, as a great school, and nothing lost on me on how great a school it is. And so that's what brought me back in 2003 to Los Angeles, and that story has sat with me a long, long, long time. It's taken me a long time to heal from that, because any failure brings back those same emotions of like, I did my best, but God damn it, I am going to do this thing regardless. So that's kind of the dichotomy of my thinking whenever I quote unquote fail at something.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's a real sense of, and you've basically outlined it, of proving yourself to your family, possibly to your father, despite, I mean, no matter what your father does or who he is as a son, there's some element of needing to uh, receive pride from your father, feel like you've done a good job, whether you whether you respect him or whether he's a louse or not. I think that's just something that's built into sons and that father son dynamic. And I would imagine that during that period when you didn't get into Manhattan, and then your father died, and all the shit's hitting the fan at the same time, I did you feel like you missed your opportunity for to once and for all say, "Dad, I made something of myself"?
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to specifically link that. I could tell you a short little story about being asked by my family to speak at his memorial service when he died. And his ashes are buried in the forest lawn down in Orange County, as
Mm-hmm.
along with a number of my other families. It's kind of the family plots are there. My grandmother, my uncle, grandfather, and extended family. My family's been in Los Angeles for, I think, more than 4 or 5 generations. Even they're quite strongly established here on my father's side, at least. My mother's side came from Ohio and West Virginia in the uh, late 50s, I believe, late 1950s. But as far as like that relationship with father, I think I summed it up in my statement, I paraphrased from my memory about what I thought about my relationship with my father, or what he gave to me or us. I struggled to find something that I could say at a memorial service that was positive.
That was appropriate, yeah, for the occasion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what was I supposed to say?
Yeah,
Like,
fuck you, I'm out.
you, you know, uh, there's so many wrongs here. My relationship with my father, as far as my majority of my memories of him, are visiting him in San Quentin and Soledad, and or right at first it was the Orange County prison system. You know, imagine being a 7-year old and going to San Quentin, and you're waiting through different checkpoints. And you're a 7-year-old kid and they're patting you down in prison, or they're waving a wand over you because, I had a little belt with a metal, belt buckle, and they took the belt off, and I wasn't allowed to go into the prison with the belt on. And, it's like I had these scary police officers shepherding us into this inner sanctum that I could perfectly picture the inner sanctum of the visiting facilities. And you go and you sit at a table, and you have to sit at that table. And then about 15 minutes later, then they unlock a door, and the prisoners come out in single file and come find you. And this is hard. You see your dad, and all the other children are seeing their dad. Maybe for the first time in a year. You might have got a letter or a call, and you just feel happy. You don't understand where you are, the environment. It's just like, my dad. And you see him, and then, he's dressed, the shirt, the chambray shirt you have on, the style was at that time, the chambray shirt buttoned up. I still completely remember this. His hair was slicked back, got a pack of cigs in the front. He's got this swagger, dead eyes, just swaggering, And then he sees you and he lights up. And you just want to feel that love.
When did you? I mean, obviously, we never recovered from things like that. I tell
Yeah.
the story. I tell the story about the workers throwing boxes into my front yard, and my
Yeah.
my big Saint Bernard George was racing back and forth. He was a dog I used to ride as a little kid, and um, we had to leave him behind, and we left the frogs that used to croak outside the house because we had a leaky
Yeah.
spigot, and they would sit underneath the spigot, and I'd see the frogs, and the
Yeah.
the candy cart that would come down the little road in Ensenada, and I'd buy the milk candy. And my friend, we left everything, and we went from a
Yeah.
very rich family to very, you know my mom and I were pretty
Yeah.
broke for a while.
Yeah.
Lived with my grandparents. And my question to you is the same question I guess I have for myself. When do you recover from those things? For me, like you,
Yeah.
music was the thing that
Yeah.
was like a life raft. But do you ever
Oh,
really feel like
yeah.
do you ever really feel like you're out of the water?
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to quickly bring back the little story because I think it's relevant. I think to come to terms with that relationship, especially as the father-son relationship, in that memorial service, I said, the greatest gift my father gave me and my sisters was that he left no footprints and he left no shadow. When I go forward into the world, I don't have to think about measuring up to my father.
You don't have that anchor. It's not
I am
there anymore.
free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm free to be exactly who I imagine myself to be. And in some ways, that freedom is a bit of that sort of not just rebellion, but the reactionary part of you that says, I will never be that person. I will never be that father. And when I am grown up, I'm going to be someone who my son respects, who I can respect my own self, who gives love to the world in the best way that you can think of. For me, that is music. That when I am on the podium or working with musicians, singers in front of me, whether they be students or professionals, for me, it's like, hey, what are we doing to make love happen in this environment so that the audience feels that we come away feeling like music is transformative. It is something that for me and many, I guess we can almost call that a maxim of life, that music is impactful. And we find this in art music ourselves most impactfully because that's what we're drawn to. Um, so when we're in the act of making music, I think that is the point at which we're looking for a bit of redemption, and we're also looking to heal because those wounds as a child run so deep about, am I worthy of being loved? And when you can finally say yes, you can start releasing. And for me, that's been pretty recently. I've worked with a therapist for a number of years for the first time in my life to say, hey, here's my traumas, here's my shit. Here it is. Help me to deal with the wounds that hold me back. And so I think music is, from the selfish point of view, a therapy that we engage in to engage in accepting love through the medium of music and giving love through the medium of music. And what better thing is there? Who can judge that? Who can say that there's something inherently selfish about it, even though many artists come from the beginning of that process from a selfish point of view? What does it do for me? But as I've, over the years, not only realized myself, but taught my students, especially my conducting students, that, hey, when we make music for selfish reasons, we're bound to be anxious and perfectionistic and miss the point of why we're doing it. What if we can be like, I point to the great master Beethoven, where his early works are very precocious. They're very superficial and precocious and brilliant and genius and prodigious, prodigy, prodigious. But look at his spiritual journey. Look at what he produced ongoing. Every iteration of the symphony showed his spiritual growth. Look at the leap he made between the second symphony, which is still firmly rooted as a classical symphony, which is firmly rooted in the shadow of Mozart and Haydn. And he leaps to the Eroica symphony. It is unbelievable, the dynamic power, the form, the content, the harmony, the melody that he creates in that symphony. Then he takes a step back and says, whoa, huge leap. Let me get the fourth symphony. Whew, back to Papa Haydn. And then he leaps again. Fifth symphony. He points the way with that first four notes, the G and the E flat, not only to the way forward for the romantics, but even into the 20th century. This little cell that he just decides this will be the nucleus of the symphony, and I will build a universe out of it. And on to the Ninth Symphony, that he goes to create worlds of communication, and then of course the Ode to Joy and the last movement, as you could sing way better than me, but O Freunde nicht diese Töne. Let us get rid of this cacophony of argument and be brothers together. And so I look to that spiritual journey as one to say, like, look, how do I myself learn to put off the things that held me back and to look towards this journey of connecting through music, to supporting others in music, and to create relationships through music that heal and bring love to the world.
That's right.
And that, I think that, right. Like, yeah, please.
My grandmother died in her sleep. She had been released from the hospital from having a heart. I was in Brazil actually at the time, and she had her heart attack. And I came home and was staying with her for about a week after she was discharged. And the night that she died, I found, well, my uncle found her in the morning. I was asleep when I heard him holler out. And the very last thing that she said, we were watching boxing. She loved boxing, I think, because her husband, my grandfather, loved boxing. So it kind of reminded her of him, I think. And so we were watching a boxing match together in the bedroom before bed. And She said, Omar, I want to tell you something. I said, okay, She said, no, you need to listen. She said, this is the honest to God truth. This is the last thing she said to me. She said, I know the secret to life. And I said, really?
Mm,
I said, she said, no, you need to listen. Listen to me. She
mm,
said, the secret to life is pretty simple. It's just to learn how to love and how to be loved. And
mm,
that's it. And it seems so
yeah.
simple. It seems so simple. But learning how to love yourself is really difficult for some people. Not for all people. Not for all people. I know some people who love themselves plenty, um, but it's really difficult. And the defenses that we put up and the compensatory damage that we create to figure that out sometimes is so difficult.
Yeah.
And you and I think of this ode to joy in a very similar way. I think of it really literally, and it's really
Mm,
powerful to
yeah.
treat each other like brothers and sisters. And it's that's why I got into music, and I think that's probably the bottom line for you too. Is this
Yeah.
helping? It kind of uh, lit the way for myself to
Yeah.
love myself. And it's funny you're talking about fatherhood too. And all of my favorite movies, by the way, are about the failure of the father. Um,
Mm.
uh, or
Godfather being
or
number
the
one amongst
triumph,
them.
yeah, or the triumph of
Yeah.
fatherly love, that one or the other.
Mm,
um
mm,
but I overcompensate. I wouldn't say overcompensate, but I'm very aware of my son's experience and my daughter's experience
yeah.
in contrast to my
Yes.
experience. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things that makes me want to go out and play ball, and do something. And I
Yeah.
remember when my son turned 4, I thought, oh, I just won this game, because I didn't kick him out of the house, and he's going to have a profoundly different experience as a child than I had. And I
Yeah.
wonder if that's something that you're conscious of too with Luke and your son.
Oh, keenly, keenly aware. Something I feel very, very metacognitive is the word that comes to mind about that. When Luke, before he was even born, I remember having a really beautiful conversation with an old friend of mine while I was teaching. I'm working at Crossroads School. They've got a great music program. I was working with Alex Traeger, was his assistant, but they had this wonderful woman, Betty Walsh, was the assistant to the program. And once upon a time, she had actually been the assistant to Michael Tilson Thomas, so she knew a lot of people in the industry. Like she really knew what was up, so to speak, with music and all that. But one day we were talking about, me and what did I think of being a father. I think that was just the simple question, because I was going to be a first time father. And I still remember the gist of what I said was like, no, I see my path as being a father is one that I get to be this person who is a model, that I can provide for him. At that time, I knew it's going to be a boy, Luke. I want to be able to be a father that he can understand is there for him, who isn't afraid to push him, but also to accept him for who he is and to interact, to play with him, to throw a baseball with him, which is such a simple thing. But literally, I did not have a person in my life to do that with. To teach him how to ride a bike, which I did. I have a video I can share with you. I taught him how to ride a bike in one day, and he learned it. And I teach him golf. These are all non-musical activities, and I think that it's because, and it's something that I wanted him to have this sense of like ability to look at the world and say there are possibilities ahead of you. I'm teaching him trumpet now, and he's in band now, so it's just great. And then, people say, "Oh, you want him to become a musician?" It's like, not if I can help it. if
Get a
someone's a
real job,
prodigy,
kid.
yeah, get a real job. Yeah. But no, I want to support him and to accept him for who he is, who he wants to be, provide that sense of, fathership. Now, it's complicated, right? Because, I have to also give myself the empathy because, I did ultimately, when he was 5, uh, we divorced, Jennifer and I, and, he's living with her, and now he's 11, he's going on 14. um, and, you start thinking about, okay, well, how do I continue to be a good father, even though that relationship didn't work out? How does he know that he has a central part in my heart, in my life? That anything related to that thing that happened is not because of him. When you're 5 or 6, you don't understand those things. And to move forward from there and to continue to, on a part-time basis, I don't get to see him every single day, to connect and to encourage and to still play golf with him and tennis and throw the baseball and go to his soccer matches and go to, lacrosse when he wanted to try lacrosse and, all these things. And it's still a beautiful and wonderful thing. And now, as you know, the opportunity, I'm married to a wonderful woman, Catherine, and I get to go at it again. We're pregnant with twin boys,
Unbelievable.
identical twin boys that are due in July, July 2021. If we could mark this in this video for the archives, and holy moly, I get to be a dad, not just a dad, but father to 2 more sons, and to now involve Luke into, hey, brothers. And that could be complicated. My mom remarried when I was like about 13 and had 2 more kids. And that relationship has been fraught the whole time. And, that's a whole other story. But still, the relationship when you're a little older to newborns, it's hard to connect. Even when you're living in the same house, it's still generationally, it took me a long time really to connect more as adults with my brother Dane, who's the youngest, and Sarah, who's the next youngest out of 5 siblings now. But I really feel a lot of love for them, and we connect, and I try to do whatever I can to stay in touch. But yeah, so now there's all this huge opportunity again for me to like say, hey, how do I continue to be a good father and to support them and to create an environment of love, of honesty? That's one thing I would have to say for me, I was intent on is just being honest with Luke. There's too many people growing up in my family who were not honest about who my father was. Uh, what we were going through. What are the struggles of our life? Who is my family? Just knowing, just being given honest and open communication and relationship. Things were always closed. Dishonesty, or at least, when you close off information, uh, it makes you feel like, well, what's wrong? There's something bad about that. And so you start developing parts of your personality that deal with relationships and information about family and in ways that you have to unpack later and relearn how to have healthy communication, healthy relationships, honesty, openness. These are all things that in my later life I am working on. I could say that, when Luke was 5, I remember we were in Target. It was right before Christmas. And he says, hey, Dad. So, yeah. He said, somebody told me that Santa Claus is not real. And I was like, oh, interesting. He says, well, is he? And I said, Luke, do you want to know the honest answer? Yeah. Okay. And I told him what I knew. I said, maybe St. Nick was a person a long time ago that did nice things for kids in his community, and as somebody they celebrated, and and it's a holiday that was combined with different um, pagan holidays that created Christmas, and it's a myth that we've propelled forward. Not to say that there isn't this idea of giving gifts, and it's a we have mythical creatures in our life. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but that for everything I know, is not a real thing. And he was, oh, okay. He was 5 years old when that story came out, and it's hard. How do you, as a parent, balance this idea of like having magical ideas and myth and story, and balance that with quote unquote reality, and that can be a struggle if you are intent on being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go back a little bit about this idea of childhood injury and recovery, and it seems like you're. I don't know if we ever truly recover from the slings and arrows of childhood, and I think everybody has their own cross to bear, major or minor. We all have our things in our childhood and relationships with parents and relatives, but it seems like with Catherine's pregnancy, the new place that you just got, and your latest musical assignment that you're fulfilling at Loxa, I feel like everything has kind of come together at this moment. And I'd like to talk to you. I'd like you to mention what it is that you're doing and where you're working
Yeah,
and all that.
yeah.
It's terrific. I have this thing about me because of my background up until my 20s, up until I found music. And when I say that music kind of saved my life, it like you, it really did.
Yeah.
I have a really bad habit of waiting for the shoe to drop.
Mm,
Like when something really good happens, there's something in the back of my mind that
hmm.
needs I need to temper the joy that I'm feeling because I'm
Yeah.
almost positive that it's going to go down the toilet really soon. Um, so is that something that you have in you, or are you able to take this moment in your life, which from an outside perspective looks like you're I don't know if you've ever been in the groove like you're in the groove now, and is
Mm,
that
hmm.
is how do you deal with that? Is it just me that waits for the shit to hit the fan, or
Omar, I think we belong to a very similar club. Um, yeah, I do have those moments and extended periods of like, don't fuck this up, sort of. It's like I've had lots of great experiences. Um, it feels like, oh, this feels too good to be true. Sort of like, this position that I have now is at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, and I was just hired last summer in August to be the chair of the music department for, if I could, put a PSA out there, the number one arts high school in America as designated by niche.com. But that, that responsibility though, it's like, I'm the dude. Like there is a huge constituency, not only of my students and my faculty, but the whole school, um, my colleagues and friends, kind of look and say, like, I always feel like and this comes back to my family and how they treated me in the past about my successes. Like, I don't get people sending me congratulation texts when I get a new job. When I got this new job, that didn't come from my family. It came from my friends and my colleagues. A lot, to a degree, but it wasn't like, holy moly, that's wow, Michael, so proud of you. And it's
Yeah,
always
you've
just
made the
been like,
Powers name.
oh,
You've made us all proud.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah. I mean, a lot of my cousins and family are, blue collar workers. So there's Powers Brothers Machine down in Montebello, and they're doing a great job. And I respect what they do, and it's amazing that my grandfather and his brothers started a machine company back in the 1960s, I believe it was. So it's been going for like 50 years now. Um, but when I got the job, there's this huge responsibility and weight I feel about like, gosh, I have this whole thing in front of me and I've got to reinvent a bunch of different wheels here. I have these great visions for what not only am I wanting to accomplish in this department, but to see the innovation happen in music education that I see is necessary to bring together the resources and the partnerships and the people, the teachers that I'm going to need, in addition to the ones we have, which are brilliant, and like all of that, I put that pressure on myself. It's like this has to be great from the beginning, you know, this has to succeed from the beginning, and it creates a bit of like this sort of like I'm my own worst enemy in a way of like getting in my own way of just like doing the things I need to do to learn the job. The first year in any job is hard enough. And I'm doing it during a pandemic, leading the whole department. And probably in the fall, we're going to come back, you know, at the very least in the fall or in August in person. I'm calling it my first year 2.0 because it's going to be like a
I
whole
think
new
we
world
all
of like
are. Yeah, I think we all are.
yeah, I mean, going to be organizing a whole new thing in person. Now we're talking about classrooms, managing spaces, shuttling people, supplies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the whole game is going to change again, and I'm going to have to relearn the job again. And so I my brain kind of thinks in this metacognitive way, and like I see all the problems before they happen. And I also try to see the solutions, but the problems weigh on me often. And I'm like, how am I going to get out of these problems, even if there's not a problem? And so it does create this sort of sense of anxiety sometimes of just like, oh, you know, is it going to be okay? Am I going to succeed? You know, and I've noticed that I am getting better at advocating for myself, giving myself permission to not, I don't want to use the word fail, but just to say, it doesn't have to be perfect every time, to ask parents for help. They don't do it, ask another parent, to ask Catherine for help, to, you know, this. So I'm getting better at just saying, hey, I've got to feel myself not as this sort of hero figure. And we go back to that thing. I've got to be the hero and charge and do this all myself and really say like, no, it's really got to be part of a team. It's got to be a part of a cohesive group of people who feel like they're in a community and they want to work together to succeed. And then they will help you to succeed. It's got to be that cycle. And I'm learning that all over again because I've been such a sort of lone wolf in my career, like holding the job at USC part-time. And at the same time, I'm working for LA City College. And at the same time, I was working at Pasadena City College. There was a 3-year stint where I was working at 3 different colleges here in LA and trying to make all that cycle and work and fitting my schedule and communicating with 3 different administrations and had my students and family and everything else going on. A kid at home, Luke, and that was crazy. And it felt like I was doing everything by myself.
Yeah,
I
well,
wasn't. As,
it's too much to control, right? It's
yeah,
really, I think what comes
yeah.
with age is obviously you have I don't know if it's foresight or if it's I have the ability to understand what I can and can't control, what I should and shouldn't control. And again, music has kind of been one of the big um, guides for me in that you music literally is ephemeral. It's uncontrollable. The
Mm,
actual vibrations
mm,
of music occur and then they disappear.
mm,
And to think that you can
mm.
hold on to them like a galloping horse or something and control it, it's really a magical thing that that I don't know. Music has taught me more than I've taught it for sure. I mean, it's been my biggest
Oh yeah.
guide, my cruelest mistress, my
Mm,
salvation. It's been
yeah.
all of those things. And
Yeah.
I'm so I've got to say that we've got to wrap it up. We've been at this for over an hour now, and I. But that being said, I would love to have another conversation and get to music a little bit more. This has been like a therapy session for me. I don't know about you, but um,
It's beautiful to connect with you, Omar, and we have certainly we've connected over art. You know, I remember meeting you in Paso Robles. You know, and that the opera project, the 3 Paderewskis, where Catherine was singing the role of Paderewski's wife, and you were in the, I believe, the chorus,
yep, yep, yep.
and like you were chatting about working for the Dream Orchestra, and you were so, but I have, ideas for programming and like LA and da 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 da. And in the background, the year before that, I was like, I'm going to create an orchestra about the identity. I kept coming back to this idea that music must be about identity and relevance. How do I do that? How do I do that? Oh, an orchestra about the city and its people, which is and then we started talking and like, whoa, okay.
Bing,
And
bing,
so on the
bing.
next
Yeah.
episode, anyway, but yeah, so it's I get back to like how much I treasure meeting you as a kindred spirit, and I haven't had that experience very often in my life, and I
Same
have to
here.
say how much I really, there's so much that we have yet to experience together because of this pandemic. We've been apart, and so much fishing and camping and making music together and building orchestras and having life together that has yet to unfold. And I'm
That's
looking
right.
forward to that.
Well, I couldn't be more proud to know you. I'm so happy for your successes and the two little ones that are on their way. And it's just,
Mm.
it's been a real pleasure knowing you. And I, like you, look forward to every second we have together in the future. And
Mm.
I'm glad to call you my friend. Thanks for being on the show, Mike.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Omar. I really appreciate it.
Genius, it takes a lot to get on my show. Genius, you're probably someone we'd like to know. You're really good at stuff, you probably like to dance. You like long walks and you wear clean pants. Genius, get onto my show.